Caitlin Clark, Nike's signature logo has been released along with a video.
Collides with a multi-million-dollar endorsement deal that has one star celebrating while the other calls for boycotts. The internet is still recovering from what just went down, and the drama is far from over. The story that's about to unfold involves secret Nike negotiations, strategic billboard placements designed to trigger rivals, and social media meltdowns that exposed exactly who's really running women's basketball right now. This isn't just about two players anymore. This is about power, money, and a rivalry that's reshaping an entire sport. March 2023, at LSU's championship celebration, Angel Reese stood over a defeated Iowa team, waving her hand in front of her face with the now infamous "You can't see me" gesture, directed straight at Caitlin Clark. That single moment didn't just celebrate LSU's victory. It declared war between two players who would define women's basketball for the next decade. The crowd erupted, social media exploded, and suddenly everyone had an opinion about respect, sportsmanship, and racial dynamics in women's sports. Reese had just done what many thought was unthinkable. She'd gotten under the skin of the supposed golden child of college basketball. Clark's face said everything.
You're my darling angel, 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 angel.
Iowa superstar who dominated headlines all season was being taunted on national television by someone who refused to bow down to the hype machine. What nobody realized at that moment was that this gesture would trigger a chain reaction leading to one of the most dramatic endorsement battles in sports history. The battle lines were drawn, and corporate America was about to pick sides. Here's where the story gets interesting. Despite being the face of women's college basketball and breaking every scoring record imaginable, Caitlin Clark wasn't getting the respect she deserved from major brands.
It will be released on October 1st, and the shoe is set to release next year in 2026.
Nike, the company that built empires around Michael Jordan and LeBron James, was treating the most marketable women's basketball player like an afterthought. Meanwhile, Angel Reese was securing deals left and right, Amazon partnerships, social media collaborations, and eventually a signature shoe deal with Reebok that had her fans celebrating while Clark's supporters fumed. The optics were terrible. For Nike, watching their biggest competitors sign the player many considered Clark's equal while they twiddled their thumbs. Clark's boyfriend, Connor McCaffrey, even called out Nike publicly in March 2024.
Last time Candace Parker donned a Chicago Sky uniform, she brought a championship to the city. Who cares if only 1,262 people showed up?
Posting on social media about how the company was disrespecting his girlfriend despite her obvious talent and marketability. The pressure was mounting, but Nike remained silent. They had a plan, but nobody knew it yet. The WNBA draft changed everything. Clark was selected first overall by Indiana. Reese went 7th to Chicago. And suddenly their college rivalry was about to go professional. For matchups per season, national television coverage, and millions of new eyeballs watching to see who would prove themselves at the highest level. Their first WNBA meeting on May 18, 2025 was everything fans hoped for and more. The Indiana Fever hosted the Chicago Sky in a game that felt more like a heavyweight boxing match than a regular season basketball contest. ESPN promoted it like a championship, and the ratings proved they were right to do so. But this wasn't just competitive basketball. This was personal. The physicality was intense. The trash talk was constant. And when Clark was called for a flagrant foul on Reese, the entire basketball world lost its mind. Social media erupted, with accusations of dirty play, claims of targeting, and debates about whether the officials were protecting certain players over others. Clark insisted it was just a basketball play, but Reese's reaction told a different story. The Sky forward milked the moment for everything it was worth, and suddenly, everyone was picking sides again. Team Clark versus Team Reese. with millions of fans ready to go to war over every play, every call, and every post-game comment. The Fever won that first meeting 93-58, setting the tone for what would become a completely one-sided season series. Clark and Indiana would take 3 of 4 games against Reese and Chicago, with each victory adding fuel to the fire of an already explosive rivalry. While the on-court battles were generating headlines, the real war was happening in corporate boardrooms. Reese's October 2024 Reebok announcement was perfectly timed to put pressure on Nike regarding their Clark situation. Here was Reese getting her signature shoe deal locked up while the supposed face of women's basketball was still waiting for Nike to make a move. The optics were embarrassing for Nike, and Clark fans weren't shy about expressing their frustration. Social media was flooded with complaints about how the company was fumbling the biggest opportunity in women's sports marketing. Every day that passed without a Clark announcement was another day for competitors to gain ground in the women's basketball endorsement space. But Nike's silence wasn't incompetence, it was strategy. They were building something bigger than anyone realized, and they were willing to let Reese have her moment because they knew what was coming. The anticipation was becoming part of the marketing campaign itself, with every rumor and speculation building toward something massive. Industry insiders started dropping hints about major announcements coming soon. Clark herself remained professional through it all, never publicly complaining about being overlooked while consistently proving her worth on the court. That patience was about to pay off in ways nobody could have predicted. February 2025 brought one of the pettiest moves in sports marketing history. Nike erected a massive Caitlin Clark billboard in downtown Chicago, just 3.5 miles from Angel Reese's home arena. The placement wasn't accidental. This was psychological warfare disguised as brand promotion. Chicago Sky fans were furious. Here was Nike rubbing their biggest rival in their faces, right in their own backyard. The billboard featured Clark in her Indiana Fever uniform with Nike branding prominently displayed, sending a clear message about who the company considered their priority in women's basketball. Reese's response was swift and emotional. Social media posts about disrespect, subtle shots at corporate favoritism, and growing frustration with how the narrative was being controlled by forces outside her influence. The billboard became a daily reminder that despite her success, she was still playing second fiddle to someone she'd beaten in college. The psychological impact was exactly what Nike intended. Every time Reese drove past that billboard on her way to practice, she was reminded that her rival had something she didn't: the backing of the world's most powerful athletic brand. The mind games were working perfectly. September 25, 2025 will go down as the day Nike finally showed their hand. The signature logo reveal wasn't just an announcement, it was a cultural moment that broke the internet and sent shockwaves through the sports world. The interlocking CC design was clean, sophisticated, and immediately recognizable as belonging to someone special. The commercial was a masterpiece of marketing genius, complete with Easter eggs hinting at a May 2026 shoe launch and production values that rivaled major Hollywood releases. Nike wasn't just announcing a logo, they were declaring Caitlin Clark the undisputed queen of women's basketball endorsements. The financial details leaked shortly after, revealing a deal worth over $28 million that dwarfed anything previously offered to a women's basketball player. Merchandise would hit stores October 1st, signature shoes would launch in May 2026, and suddenly, Clark wasn't just a basketball player, she was a brand empire in the making. The timing was perfect. Right as playoff excitement peaked and millions of fans were engaged with women's basketball, Nike dropped the biggest announcement in WNBA endorsement history. The internet response was immediate and overwhelming, with Clark fans celebrating what felt like vindication after years of waiting. Angel Reese's response to the Nike announcement revealed everything fans needed to know about the current state of this rivalry. Instead of congratulating a fellow player or focusing on her own success, Reese took to social media calling for Nike boycotts and expressing frustration about what she saw as unfair treatment. The contrast couldn't have been more stark. While Clark was professionally handling the biggest moment of her career, Reese was publicly melting down about someone else's success. The optics were terrible for someone trying to position herself. As a legitimate rival to the woman, everyone was now calling the face of women's basketball. But the drama reached peak pettiness during Candace Parker's jersey retirement ceremony in Chicago on August 30th, while every other Sky player wore tribute shirts honoring the legend. Reese zipped her warm-up jacket so tight she could barely breathe rather than show Parker's face. This was the same Candace Parker who had rated Reese as a C-tier player earlier that season. And apparently, that criticism had broken something inside Angel's head. The sight of a professional athlete refusing to show basic respect to a retiring legend on their special night was embarrassing enough. But doing it because of a month-old rating made it exponentially worse. Reese shot 3 for 10 that night, while clearly playing in her feelings instead of focusing on basketball. The message was clear: when things don't go Angel's way, professionalism goes out the window. The Nike announcement triggered a social media war that exposed the deep divisions within women's basketball fandom. Clark supporters flooded platforms, celebrating what they saw as long overdue recognition for their favorite player. Reese fans pushed back with claims about racism, favoritism, and corporate bias affecting endorsement decisions. But the most telling responses came from the players themselves. Clark maintained her characteristic professionalism, thanking Nike and focusing on the opportunity to grow women's basketball. Her response was mature, gracious, and focused on the bigger picture rather than individual achievements. Reese's approach was completely different. Public criticism of Nike's decision-making, calls for boycotts, and social media posts that made her frustration obvious to anyone paying attention. The contrast between how these two stars handle adversity couldn't have been more apparent if it was scripted for a reality show. Corporate brands took notice. When your response to criticism or disappointment is public meltdowns and petty gestures, companies start questioning whether you're the kind of partner they want, representing their products for years to come. Professional maturity matters in endorsement decisions, and that lesson was being taught in real time. The September 25th Nike announcement didn't just impact Clark and Reese. It sent shockwaves through the entire women's basketball ecosystem. Other brands immediately started scrambling to identify and sign the next generation of talent before Nike could lock up all the premium players. Younger players watching this unfold learned valuable lessons about building personal brands and handling business opportunities. Clark's patient approach and professional demeanor were being rewarded with generational wealth, while Reese's emotional responses were becoming cautionary tales about how not to handle disappointment. The WNBA itself had to grapple with the reality that their biggest draw was now backed by the world's most powerful athletic brand. The league's official social media accounts remained suspiciously quiet about the announcement, raising questions about whether they understood basic marketing principles or had other agendas affecting their promotion strategies. International expansion possibilities became realistic overnight. Nike's global distribution networks meant Clark merchandise would reach markets where the WNBA had minimal presence, potentially creating new fan bases in Europe, Asia, and South America. This wasn't just about American basketball anymore. This was about building a worldwide brand. Looking ahead to the October 1st merchandise launch and May 2026 shoe release, we're witnessing the birth of something unprecedented in women's sports. Nike isn't treating this like a diversity initiative or charity case. They're making their same level of investment they'd make in a male superstar they expected to dominate markets for decades. The psychological pressure on Clark is immense now. Every game will be scrutinized not just for basketball performance, but for how it affects brand perception and merchandise sales. The weight of representing an entire sports commercial viability would crush most athletes, but Clark's track record suggests she thrives under that pressure. For Angel Reese, the path forward becomes more complicated. Her Reebok partnership is solid, but watching your biggest rival secure a deal that dwarfs your own creates motivation that cuts both ways. Either it fuels unprecedented improvement and success, or it leads to more public meltdowns and petty behavior that damages long-term marketability. The broader implications for women's basketball are staggering. When signature shoes launch in May 2026, young girls will see women's basketball players marketed with the same energy and resources as their male counterparts. That normalization of female athletic excellence could inspire an entire generation to view women's sports as legitimate career paths rather than secondary options. The numbers don't lie, and they tell a story that's uncomfortable for some people to accept. Clark's Nike deal represents validation of everything her supporters have been saying for years. She's not just the face of women's basketball. She's the most marketable athlete in the sport's history. Nike's willingness to invest this level of resources proves they see Clark as someone who can compete for marketing dollars with their biggest male basketball endorsers. It's the commercial production value, the strategic billboard placement, the comprehensive merchandise rollout. This is how you treat superstars, not niche athletes. Meanwhile, the contrast with how certain other players handle success and disappointment continues to provide real-time lessons about professionalism versus pettiness. When your response to someone else's achievement is calling for boycotts and making scenes at retirement ceremonies, you're telling the entire business world exactly what kind of partner you'd be. The May 2026 shoe launch will be the ultimate test of Clark's marketing power and cultural impact. If she can successfully launch a signature line that resonates with both basketball players and casual consumers, she have accomplished something very few women's basketball players have ever achieved. That's the kind of milestone that creates generational wealth and cements legacies forever. This rivalry has already given women's basketball more mainstream attention than the sport had received in decades. The corporate investment, the social media engagement, the television ratings, everything points toward a fundamental shift in how society views female athletic excellence. Whether certain players like it or not, Caitlin Clark is leading that transformation. And Nike just bet $28 million that she's only getting started. The drama between these two stars isn't just entertainment. It's the growing pains of a sport finally getting the recognition and investment it deserves. And based on everything we've seen so far, this is only the beginning of what promises to be the most financially lucrative and culturally significant rivalry in women's sports history.